Have you ever been kicked off your own lawn by a complete stranger? Today's story begins with a refreshing glass of passion fruit juice on a peaceful Sunday afternoon, and ends with handcuffs, a shiny black SUV, and a sudden emergency meeting with federal agents. But don't mistake this for a movie. This is HOA Karen Advanced Edition. Featuring a clipboard, a megaphone, and a self-appointed HOA officer with level 10 delusions of authority. This is the story of Jolene Madison Whitaker, a woman bold enough to call HOA security to kick me off my own legally owned land, only to receive a plot twist titled Federal Agents, Court Orders, and a Karen-Free Zone sign. And me? I was just reading a book under a tree and accidentally became a legend. Welcome to HOA Patrol, where drama explodes over a cup of tea. Part 1. A Peaceful Sunday. Before the storm. There's a quiet truth no one says out loud, but everyone knows. The biggest storms in life don't start with thunder. They begin with a calm afternoon, a cold glass of lemonade, and a folding chair placed beneath the tree you planted with your own hands 15 years ago. That's exactly how my day started. I didn't know I was about to walk into a federal-level showdown. I was simply enjoying my day off, on a piece of land I bought, legally registered, and paid taxes on, down to the last penny. My name is Alex D. Warren, Federal Advisory Specialist. Some people call me the guy whose paperwork never misses. A signature. My job doesn't make headlines. You won't hear me on the evening news. But I'm connected to more top-secret government projects than I can publicly admit. I'm not an agent, but I'm not exactly just a civilian either. And that little gray area is exactly what made a woman named Jolene Madison Whitaker, or as I like to politely call her, Karen 2001, feel very, very uncomfortable. She wasn't my neighbor. Not even close. My house sits right at the edge of a neighborhood called Cotton Ridge, a place run by an organization that borders on cult-level obsession, the HOA, Homeowners Association. I didn't sign up. I'm not bound by their sacred fence color codes, lawn height bylaws, or how many lawn chairs I'm allowed in the backyard. In other words, my home is an HOA-exempt zone. And to Jolene, that's an unforgivable sin. I'd seen her many times, circling the neighborhood like a patrol dog, clipboard in hand, wearing a faded pink tracksuit from circa 2003, with the expression of someone who's kicked out 3 kids, just for eating ice cream too close to the tennis court. My first impression of her? She looked like a yoga instructor, but acted like she ran a minimum security prison. And that day, just as I turned to chapter 2 of my book, Jolene appeared, right at the edge of my property line. "You're not allowed to be here," she said, eyes unblinking, voice shrill like a fire alarm. At first I thought she was talking to someone else. I glanced around. Nope, just me, the chair, the lemonade, and the oak tree I planted back when my hair was still brown. "Sorry, what was that?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. She stepped half a pace closer. I said, "This backyard is under HOA jurisdiction. And you're trespassing on shared property. You're not in the resident registry. Who are you?" I calmly set my book down. "I live here. This land is not under HOA, confirmed by county land records and the original subdivision map from 1995. Jolene took a deep breath, the kind actresses take in dramas before screaming at someone. Then she pulled out her phone, raised it like a distress flare, and said, "If you don't leave in 5 seconds, I'm calling HOA security to have you arrested." I took a sip of my lemonade, nodded politely, and asked, "Are you sure you're not mistaken? This is my yard." "No," Jolene replied as if I were a kindergartner. "I've reviewed the zoning maps. This area has been under HOA jurisdiction since we ratified the charter in 2012. All citizens using land within the neighborhood must comply with the bylaws." I crossed my legs, set the lemonade aside, and said, "I bought this house in 2010. This property has never been under HOA boundaries. I still have the paperwork if you'd like to see it. She ignored me. Instead, she pulled out a plastic sign from her tote bag that read, HOA jurisdiction, no trespassing, and began planting it right at the edge of my lawn as if she were claiming territorial sovereignty. I couldn't help it. I laughed out loud. That's when Chad appeared, the self-proclaimed head of HOA security. He arrived in a golf cart outfitted with a megaphone, decked out in military-style camo tracksuit, wearing mirrored sunglasses that reflected the sun like he was stationed in Iraq, not in a suburban cul-de-sac with a couple dozen homes. Civilian. Chad bellowed through the megaphone, his voice sounding like the B-roll of a low-budget action movie. You are trespassing on property overseen by the Cottonfield Hills HOA. Vacate immediately or there will be serious consequences. I glanced. Around, a few windows cracked open, phones poked out. Someone was already filming. I sighed, pulled my phone from my back pocket, and dialed. Rivera, we've got a situation, I said. Come around the back. Bring the land records if needed. On my way, he replied, in his usual dry, emotionless, efficient tone. Jolene flinched when she saw me making the call. She snapped, Who do you think you're calling, acting all dangerous? Would you prefer to speak with Agent Rivera or Agent Lynn first? I asked, half sarcastic, half serious. Civilian, Chad shouted again, his voice cracking now under pressure. We've recorded everything and filed an incident report. You will be removed from the premises and permanently banned from returning. I raised one hand, waving it like I was surrendering. Just don't spill my lemonade. About 3 minutes later, the entire Cotton Ridge neighborhood seemed to hold its breath in an eerie moment of silence. The housewives stopped watering their lawns, the kids froze mid-soccer kick, and Chad, the self-declared HOA security enforcer, froze. In place as the sound of a sleek black SUV echoed from the narrow lane behind my backyard. The vehicle glided by like a stalking panther, silent, powerful, and without a single flashing light. It stopped precisely by my fence. The door opened. Agent Rivera stepped out first, neatly dressed in a black suit, Ray-Ban sunglasses reflecting sunlight, and Karen's growing panic. He didn't need to say a word. His presence said it all. We're not here to discuss Rosebush, boundaries. Karen, Jolene, widened her eyes. Chad's jaw dropped so hard he nearly lost grip of his shiny new megaphone, the very one he'd been using to shout HOA self-declared authority into the breeze. Rivera walked slowly toward the fence, his voice calm but each word hitting like a gavel. Ma'am, you are standing adjacent to a property under federal security jurisdiction. Any interference may be considered trespassing and obstruction of duty. Karen blinked repeatedly as if hoping this was a skit from a comedy show. But this wasn't a TikTok live stream. This was real life. And she had just stumbled onto the wrong stage of federal law. I got up from my chair, shrugged. They're not fans of being interrupted during patrols, especially when rogue clipboards start flying around. Chad tried to salvage the scene, stammering. Are you like a private bodyguard? Or just cosplaying as a Fed? Rivera turned to him, expression unchanged. I am a supervisory agent with the Department of Homeland Security, and I can start taking your statement immediately. Chad instantly took off his sunglasses and tucked the megaphone behind his back, like it had never existed. But Karen? Karen doubled down. She pulled out her phone, held it up to Rivera, and screamed, I know your type. You're actors. I've seen the videos. Fake FBI setups all over the internet. I'm live streaming this and you're going viral, buddy. Rivera calmly raised his badge. The sun glinted off the polished silver emblem set against a deep blue ID card with a blazing red seal. Karen lifted her phone and smacked it against his badge. Yes, you read that right. She literally hit his badge with her phone like she was swatting a mosquito. Fake. All of it's fake. I know my rights. Rivera signed. Lynn. The SUV's rear door opened. Agent Lynn, tall, lean, and cold as dry ice, stepped out, holding a tablet displaying a map of the federally secured perimeter around my property. Ms. Jolene Madison Whitaker, Lynn stated, this property does not fall under any HOA jurisdiction. It is federally registered as an active operations zone, file number 48 RF 2138. Any unauthorized intrusion or recording may be prosecuted under Title 18 U.S. Code, Section 1382. Karen stood frozen like a wax statue. Chad fake coughed and took a step back. I sipped my lemonade, slipped on my sunglasses, and asked Rivera casually, should we put up a sign? Or let her live stream the restricted zone PSA for us? Rivera didn't smile, but the corner of his mouth twitched. Just a little. She's already doing it for us. Still, Karen wasn't done. I'll call the police. I'll report to you. You'll all be exposed for impersonating authority and threatening civilians. Rivera simply nodded and said, very well. But before they arrive, I'm asking you to vacate the area. This is your first and final warning. At that moment, a second black SUV from Homeland Security pulled up out front. The DHS logo plastered boldly across its door. Chad slipped on the curb trying to backpedal, landing face first on the grass. Karen turned to me, lips trembling, and asked, who are you? I pointed to the small bronze plaque near my gate. Alex. D. Warren, federal advisor, first and only resident of this place. Karen said nothing. For the first time in this entire story, she was speechless. But I knew this wasn't the end. This was just the opening act of her imaginary HOA uprising. Because, for someone like Karen, there's no such thing as retreat. Only more props and rewriting the rules. If you thought things ended after Agents Rivera and Lynn showed up, you've underestimated Karen. Or rather, Jolene Madison Whitaker, the self-proclaimed vice president of the greatest HOA in the region, Cotton Pines Estates. I once believed nothing could stop the stupidity of calling security on a man for sitting in his own backyard. But then Jolene and her HOA board took idiotic to a whole new level. That very evening, just as I was enjoying a microwave lasagna, Rivera shot me a short text. Looks like HOA's holding an emergency meeting. We're monitoring. I shrugged. Figured they'd sit around, complain a bit, and move on. I was wrong. At the HOA Community Hall, originally built for senior yoga and bingo night, Karen convened an urgent session with the official topic, neutralizing federal-level threats from the imposter residing within our neighborhood. Stacked. In front of her were dozens of freshly laser-printed documents, each boldly highlighted in yellow with the headline, HOA Defense Plan, Level 1, Deception and Expulsion. Seated around the table were the neighborhood's finest, Chad, head of HOA Security, the same guy who screamed at me through a megaphone yesterday. Mr. Langley, who once submitted a petition claiming my fence emits ultrasonic signals. Linda. Firmly convinced that the lavender bush by my front porch is neurological interference technology. They discussed, took notes, sketched diagrams, and drew maps. I knew all this thanks to Rivera, always one step ahead, who had discreetly planted a wireless camera on the community center wall that morning. He sent me the footage later that night. Karen stood before a whiteboard as tall as her shoulder, using a marker to sketch a full map of Cotton Pines. My house? Marked with a red triangle labeled Target for Containment. We cannot allow a government impersonator to roam freely within our pure community, Karen announced, as if campaigning for state governor. I've mapped 3 access routes, one through the north lawn, one via the kitchen fence, and another near the mailbox path. Linda raised her hand. I propose we tape a warning to his pine tree. The spiritual frequencies from it spike every evening. Chad nodded solemnly. I can coordinate a patrol squad at 5 a.m. We'll deploy drones, mini ones, with HOA flags, to assert dominance. I nearly spit my tea all over my screen. The climax of the meeting came when Karen introduced her partial tetrahedral lockdown plan. I have no idea either. which included installing warning stakes labeled HOA property along my fence perimeter, creating a visual buffer zone using plywood shields to block the view of my house, Chad's brilliant idea, holding a citizenship check in front of my home. Every passerby must sign a petition condemning federal infiltration. The plan passed with a 6-1 vote. The sole dissent? Old Uncle Johnson, who showed up thinking there'd be free donuts. The next morning, just as Karen promised, a paper perimeter had been set up around my house. A HOA land, no unauthorized. Missions sign stacked next to my flower bed. Chad cruising by in a golf cart, blasting over his megaphone. You are entering a monitored zone. A sweet old lady from across the street sat in a folding chair, tapping bamboo sticks and whispering, "Banish negative energy," every time I opened my front door. But they forgot one important thing. I'm not just that guy at the end of the street. I'm Alex D. Warren, federal advisor, and I have more than one way to clear weeds without ever picking up a shovel. I don't know who first spread the news, but by the next morning, Cotton Ridge had become a public stage. A woman in a pastel tracksuit and platinum-dyed hair declared herself protector of the community, stepping up like the lead in a low-budget political musical. I was sipping coffee under my usual tree. Yes, the same backyard spot that Jolene Madison Whitaker, Karen for short, once declared to be under HOA surveillance, when I heard an unfamiliar buzzing. I looked up and saw a small flying device hovering above me, a drone. I sighed. Of course. The drone, I quickly noticed, wasn't a cheap toy. It was a semi-professional rig, hovering with good stability, camera mounted on a gimbal, streaming live footage via Wi-Fi. Someone on the other end was definitely watching. Moments later, I got a text from Rivera. "Brace yourself. Karen's live streaming, and this time, she's got viewers." I turned on the secondary phone I used to monitor local social media feeds. And there she was, Jolene on screen. Eyes wide, voice shaking as she held what looked like a wireless mic. Actually a Bluetooth karaoke microphone. Behind her, a wrinkled white cloth acting as a backdrop, scribbled with bold letters, "The truth will be revealed." On air, Karen declared, "We are under attack by shadow forces, government imposters. People claiming to be agents are seizing our land, and this is my home. No one sets up cameras in this neighborhood without HOA approval." She spoke as if I'd built a military checkpoint in my backyard. As Karen flailed around in full live stream mode, the crowd began to grow. Some were nosy neighbors. Some brought folding chairs. One couple even showed up with buttered popcorn, as if this was a free outdoor movie screening. Doi J la bandich tieng an chi tiet, chin ksak, guan guyen fong kachke chuyen kua bancho pan 6, kuak chien camera. Truyen tong hap kwak, vakarin pat song truk tiep. I used to think, if there's one thing that can escalate a situation from absurd to national broadcast level ridiculous, it's Karen discovering livestream. Unfortunately for humanity, Jolene Madison Whitaker didn't just discover livestream. She invented an entire television program of her own, titled Resistance Against Federal Invasion. I, Alex D. Warren, federal advisor, was sitting in my backyard, sipping my third cup of coffee that day, when I heard the telltale click from across the fence. Not a car door, not a gate, but the distinct snap of a gimbal locking into place. Karen had arrived fully armed, with a professional-grade stabilizer, the latest iPhone, a clip-on microphone, and the eyes of a daytime TV host waiting for her cue. "Hello, everyone," Jolene's voice rang out with theatrical drama. "Today I will show the nation the truth. The truth about how the federal government is occupying Cotton Ridge." I glanced at Agent Rivera, standing beside the official, government security camera. His eyes didn't leave the screen. "She just went live," he muttered, "with subtitles, background music, and an animated intro." On Karen's stream, on what I now call K-Truth Network TM, a banner flashed across the screen. Exclusive, you can't silence truth. And underneath, footage of my backyard, with me labeled as suspected spy. Within 10 minutes, half a dozen alternative social commentary YouTube channels had picked up Karen's feed. The comments rolled in. I knew it. Government's infiltrating from the suburbs. Why is he growing sage near the fence? To disguise telecom signals? Chad, part-time HOA security guard, reappeared, this time with a VHS camcorder powered by a car battery. I'm recording everything. For the HOA Internal Security Council, he said. I asked. Which channel are you broadcasting on? Chad shrugged. Haven't decided yet, but if it goes viral, I might sell it to Netflix. I walked back inside, sat down in front of my security control panel. By now, we had 6 camera angles, including one from the oak tree. I turned to Rivera. Did we get enough coverage? He smirked. We even have slow motion of her secretly posting flyers on your mailbox. Karen wasn't slowing down. She'd set up an entire citizen truth desk on the sidewalk, handing out flyers that read, Save Cotton Ridge from Rooted Tyranny. Lynn, the agent who'd been quiet all morning, finally spoke. If she adds a green screen back there, we might need to check if she's registered as a digital content producer. The problem? Karen's live stream hit 20,000 views in under an hour, not because she was right, but because she was too bizarre not to watch. One anonymous local posted a comment. I'm just watching to see if she microchips the neighbor's dog or builds a 5G antenna on her shed. And then, the actual media showed up. A local news van rolled in. A young reporter, who probably still dreamed of winning the Miss Town pageant, stepped out with a mic. Before I could even open my mouth, Karen flew toward them like a marvel. Superhero from the discount universe. You're here. Finally, justice arrives. Film that board over there. I found a signal for remote mind control. The reporter glanced at the sign she pointed to. It was a high-voltage warning rusted since 2013. Rivera approached, calmly flashing his badge. This is federal property. Filming beyond the fence is not allowed. Karen screamed, They're silencing me. You see, I'm being suppressed. The Reporter whispered, should we leave? The cameraman nodded. Before she claims I'm a government-programmed robot, yes. Karen didn't stop. She live-streamed even as the media backed away. We've been betrayed! She shouted into the mic, while the camera shook violently from the wind. And rage. I sat back down, poured myself another cup of tea, and said, to Rivera, think we should invite her on the HOA night talk show, Imagination vs. Reality? Rivera replied, only if she signs a statement admitting to district-level misinformation. I used to think dramas like this only happened on television. But no. With a Karen, a Chad, and a federal grade suit, this was only the pre-show. I've seen a lot during my federal career. Congressional hearings, black budget scandals, even one time getting stuck in an elevator with a senator and his chihuahua. But never, never have I seen a metallic orange SUV with a bald eagle in. A helmet logo roll through Cotton Ridge, bringing with it a silence so deep I could hear Karen swallow. The car cruised in slowly, as if it already knew every eye in the neighborhood was locked on it. Mounted on the roof was a 360-degree camera, and a front LED panel flashed the words, Civil Response Analysis Unit, collecting data. Karen, still live-streaming to 3 viewers, one of whom was a bot named A Patriot Mama 69, froze in place like a lawn ornament. I stayed seated, mint tea in hand. Rivera stood next to me, eyes narrowing at the LED panel. Who are they? I asked. Rivera replied in a near whisper. That's the Federal Public Information Task Force. If they show up without prior notice, there's a reason. And no one wants to be that reason. Karen, of course, was not in the no one category. She stepped right into the street, phone held high in both hands, yelling, "There! That's them! The mind control enforcers! We're not afraid! I'm an HOA! Resident, I have rights." The SUV's passenger door opened. A woman in a black coat and sunglasses stepped out. She held a folder. Her expression? Flat as steel on glass. "Who is Jolene Madison Whitaker?" she asked, voice sharp, clean, and cold. Karen smirked. "I am the people's representative, vice president of our HOA, and the first to confront you." The woman didn't flinch. She pulled a paper from her folder, carefully unfastened a staple, and held it up to Karen. "I am acting on behalf of the Office of Federal Internal Oversight. This is a preliminary investigation notice regarding allegations of defamation, obstruction of federal activity, and dissemination of threatening misinformation." Karen's face turned from aggressive pink to bluish white. If there's an expression called slapped with federal law, that was it. Chad, leaning against his HOA golf cart with an energy drink in hand, muttered, "Okay, yeah, this just got serious." Karen shouted, "This is all lies. I have the right to question. I'm just protecting my neighborhood." The woman didn't blink. "We have collected all streams, broadcasts, printed flyers, and self-recorded videos. You posted threatening messages on federal property. You declared a civilian as a spy. You led the media into a restricted area. And you claimed the HOA had authority to expel residents by vote. These actions fall under Clause 12, Section 4 of the Federal Protection of Operations in Residential Zones Act." Karen was silent. Chad had stepped back 5 paces and pretended to untangle a leaf from his tire. Rivera smirked behind his sunglasses. "She's been language locked for 12 seconds. A new record." Karen attempted a comeback. "You can't just come here and threaten me like this." The woman replied, "This is not a threat. It's an official warning. Any further disruptive actions and you will be escorted to federal security offices for questioning." Then she turned to me, gave a polite nod. "Thank you, Mr. Warren, for your cooperation. We will continue monitoring." Karen backed away, phone still in hand, but no longer pointing it at her face. A faint voice on her stream whispered, "Karen, what's going on?" "Shut up, Linda." The SUV slowly rolled out of the neighborhood. Its rear LED displayed one final message. "Status. Explained. Monitoring in progress." Karen stood frozen, eyes blank, as if every HOA script she'd ever written had just been set on fire. As for me, I took a slow sip of tea and said, "This isn't over." For Karen, failure is just the prelude to the sequel. And I was right. Karen didn't disappear. She began preparing an emergency HOA meeting with the agenda to re-elect neighborhood order, expel the spy, and review all antennas within a 100-meter radius. Rivera looked at me and chuckled, "She's about to rebuild the kingdom." I replied, "And we've got front-row seats." Everything started that very morning. The sun hadn't yet touched the edge of my backyard fence when Jolene had already set up her HOA resistance center on the sidewalk. An old plastic table, a sun-faded umbrella, and a stack of poorly printed flyers that read, "Defend the nation, resist the imposter government," complete with a hand-drawn map where my house was marked in red, labeled Deep State Signal Hub. I thought I was watching a middle school play directed by an art teacher, but no, Jolene had become the director, scriptwriter, and lead actress, all at once. And that day, the official premiere began. 2 a.m. Chad, the self-proclaimed HOA security chief, showed up with a handheld speaker, since the old microphone had shattered during a previous live stream. He stood solemnly in front of Jolene's house and announced, "We, representatives of the free citizens of Cotton Valley, officially demand the expulsion of resident Alex Warren. Unclear tax ID signs of unlawful activity, suspected federal ties." I nearly choked on my coffee. Unclear tax ID? The same one I had filed line by line down to the last cent. 8:07 a.m. Karen started live streaming. The video quality was low, but the arrogance? Breathtaking. "We're being watched. This is the time for the people to rise. I've filed a motion to place his house under temporary HOA control." Next to her was a pile of legal documents. In reality, a dusty office folder containing printed Google Maps and my Amazon receipts. 15 a.m. I got a message from Rivera. "Livestream footage is under review. HQ wants to assess misinformation." Broadcasting. I replied with just one sentence. "Prepare for the final act of the play." AM. Another SUV rolled in, not from my team this time, but from the Federal Financial Investigations Office. Two people stepped out, both in suits. One carried a leather case, the other a search warrant. Not for my yard, for Jolene's house. Chad vanished from the scene in 3 seconds flat, like a spirit leaving its host. I stood still, coffee still in hand. "Jolene!" She screamed, she shouted, and, like always, claimed it was a plot to silence the truth. But this time, the agents didn't need to say much. They presented receipts for party expenses taken. From the HOA budget, purchases of personal items, payments to security services, read Chad, using landscaping maintenance funds. All of it listed in a voice as calm as reading from a diner menu. 10:05 a.m. Jolene was officially handcuffed in front of the entire Cotton Valley community. Some people filmed it, others applauded. Somewhere, Chad was wondering whether to switch careers and become a mailman. As for me, I just stood there watching Jolene yell, "I'm a victim, I was doing what's right," as she was led to the car. Rivera turned to me. "You think she actually believes what she says?" I shrugged. When someone prints 200 flyers to protest satellites, it's no longer a belief. It's a diagnosis. That afternoon, the HOA held an emergency meeting, this time without Jolene in the chair. Instead, the members voted to dissolve the current board, permanently revoke Jolene's membership, and, surprise, issued a public apology to me. I didn't say anything. I simply returned the sign I once saw hanging at the HOA meeting gate a few months ago. Community first, control second. And that evening, they hung it back up, this time, on my front gate. And this time, it came from the whole neighborhood. Sometimes peace doesn't come from diplomacy. It comes from a barbecue. That morning, I sat on my front steps with a coffee in hand, while Rivera stood next to me checking a guest list. He wore an apron. Yes, an apron. A federal agent who once dismantled a multi-state money laundering ring was now debating whether to grill burgers or hot dogs first. "A barbecue?" I had asked him the night before when he proposed the idea. "We arrested Karen," he said. "Now it's time to heal. The community. And nothing heals like free meat and lemonade." I couldn't argue with that. Karen, full name Jolene Madison Whitaker, was currently being held at a federal facility, pending interrogation for trespassing on federal property, obstruction of federal personnel, and, perhaps most interestingly, impersonating HOA authority to illegally seize land. Chad, the self-declared security guard and part-time HOA shaman, had voluntarily stepped down from all management roles. Lately, I'd seen him sitting near the backyard fence, drawing mandalas and listening to meditation music. But what was truly surprising? The neighbors were smiling again. The barbecue started at 3 p.m. Rivera brought a small Bluetooth speaker playing a remix of Staying Alive, a choice so hilariously ironic I almost choked. Lynn, the always silent, always serious agent, was in charge of drinks. She labeled each jug "Free HOA juice, no enforcement clauses included." I set up a small canopy under the tree where Karen once ordered me to leave. Now it was the post-HOA emotional recovery booth. People came, sat down, sipped drinks, and laughed. No one mentioned Karen directly, but here and there whispers floated. I almost spit my drink when she got cuffed. Or, that federal restricted area sign? Legendary. A group of kids set up a cardboard sign at the yard entrance. In scribbled marker, it read, Karen Free Zone. Enter with a smile. Beneath it, a drawing of Karen with wild hair, holding a clipboard, being chased by a fake dog. I don't know who drew it, but I suspect Lynn had something to do with it. Chad showed up mid-barbecue wearing a plain white t-shirt and a wide-brimmed sun hat. He walked slowly, like someone trying to appear rehabilitated by circumstance. I was flipping meat on the grill when he approached and whispered, "You know, I used to think you were a serious threat." I didn't respond, just tilted my head. "Now," he exhaled, "now, I think you're just a threat to overcooked steak." I laughed. Chad laughed too. It was the first time he'd ever laughed without wielding fake authority. That day, the community felt reset. No more suspicious glares, no more anonymous HOA emails, just quiet conversations, laughter, and something rare. Freedom. An elderly woman, previously the only one who supported Karen during the failed HOA meeting, quietly approached me. "You know," she said, "I used to think you were weird. When I saw the black SUV outside your house, I reported it to the HOA. I nodded. "Now," she continued, "now I think you're the reason kids can laugh near a fence without being told 1.2 meters max." Just one sentence, yet it summed up everything I'd endured. As the sun dipped behind the rooftops, Rivera pulled out a small wooden sign and carefully hung it on the side fence of my house. No warnings, no regulations, just 3 carved words: Karen Free Zone. People clapped. Kids posed for photos. One shouted, "I'm putting that on my backpack tomorrow." I didn't say anything. I just smiled, then sat back in my old folding chair under the familiar tree. That night, before wrapping up, Rivera raised his glass in my yard. To the brave ones who sat peacefully in their own lawn, despite clipboards, megaphones, and HOA conspiracies. Laughter echoed through the block. I raised my glass, too. Lynn murmured, "This is the weirdest assignment I've ever had, and I once supervised a UFO seminar in Nevada." I replied, "At least here, no one wears tinfoil hats. Just baseball, caps, and grilled sausages." That night, I slept well for the first time in months. No clipboards tapping on my gate, no fake notices taped to my door. Just wind and the dim glow of the Karen Free Zone sign shimmering under the moonlight. But I knew the story wasn't quite over, because Karen might be arrested. But Karen Ness? It never really dies. We can only hope. It doesn't come back with a new HOA membership application. The morning Karen moved out, Cotton Creek was eerily quiet. No broom dragging along porches, no letters falling from mailboxes with red stamps screaming non-HOA compliant. No clipboard, just the grumbling of a moving truck engine and the crunch of tires over the dead yellow grass. Once the headquarters of the self-appointed HOA government, ruled by Jolene Madison Whitaker. She sat on the porch step with sunglasses too big to be real, clutching her clipboard like it was the last remaining shard of power she had. No goodbyes, no farewells, no eggs thrown, no chance, just a cold silence. Like the curtain falling on a play no one wanted to see in the first place. Chad came out of her house still wearing her former HOA Watch Commander t-shirt, now with the word Commander crossed out. She watched Jolene climb into the truck, holding a cheap plastic coffee cup, and sighed softly. I caught her eye, and for the first time ever, I saw something I'd never seen in any of the emergency HOA meetings before. Clarity. "I should have walked away sooner," Chad murmured. "No judgment," I replied. "Except for Google Earth. Your megaphone mark is still visible on the lawn." She laughed, a sad kind of laugh. That afternoon, the temporary council, formed after the HOA disbanded, sent a letter to every household. This time it wasn't about trash pickup violations or overly dark garage doors. It was an apology. "We're sorry for letting power fall into the hands of the undeserving. We vow no more self-appointed HOAs, no more baseless warnings, just neighbors, in every sense of the word." At the end of the letter, there was an invitation. "Join us, Mr. Alex D. Warren. Your experience with federal agents and walking clipboards might be useful." I declined. My schedule is packed. Folding chair sitting, icy passion fruit drinking, and teaching kids how to avoid pastel-clad people. Peeking over fences. A week later, they installed a small stone bench under the tree where it all started, the exact spot where Jolene once demanded, "I vacate HOA-controlled territory." Carved into the bench, he stayed. Property owner. Since 2010, never left his lawn Rivera. The man who once stared down hostage takers looked at it and shook his head. "That's the most expensive sign I've ever seen, but worth every taxpayer dollar." Jolene disappeared from the map, but her residue lingered, as all Karens do. Some remnants remained. A scorch mark on the grass where Chad once tested his HOA signal transmitter. It was just an old barbecue grill painted HOA HQ. A rusty pole poking from the dirt where she once set up her media-free zone. And most importantly, a community that finally learned real power comes from listening, not yelling. The family that moved into Jolene's house were an elderly couple, George and Sylvia Parker. On their first day, they handed out cookies to the entire neighborhood. George raised a glass of apple juice and said, "We heard the last tenant made the rules around here. Don't worry, the only thing I govern is the domino table." The street erupted in laughter, the kind that's relieved. My story didn't end with a mic drop. It ended with a t-shirt. A kid wore one featuring me in a lawn chair holding a drink with 3 suited agents in the background. Printed across the top, Federal Yard Crew. We maintain law and lawn. I didn't make that shirt, but I kept one. Hung it next to the Karen Free Zone sign. The last time I ever saw Jolene was in a hallway surveillance video at a federal building. She signed a citation form, her hands trembling, saying nothing. Clipboard still there. A man, probably a public defender, whispered something. She nodded. Then I walked away. No eye contact, no second glance. As for me, I'm still here. In my yard. By the tree. With a stone bench, a little wooden sign, and a story so long it became a legend. Some folks retell it for fun. Some say it's a modern fable. A kid once told a classmate, "Careful. If Karen shows up, Uncle Alex will call the black SUV." I don't correct them. Because sometimes you don't change a legend, you just make sure it stops people from fearing clipboards. That's enough. And with that, I closed my book. The wind rustled lightly across the fence. And I still haven't left my lawn. Because this is my home. And I don't need anyone's permission to stay. This is HOA patrol. And if you ever doubted the existence of a real-life Karen, well, welcome. You've just witnessed a special episode called Karen versus the Feds and the ending in handcuffs. Hit like, subscribe, and remember, if someone walks toward you holding a clipboard, check your property line first or call me.